Well, we're here at the Academy Sports and Outdoors Rigs and Techniques at the CCA
Yes,
Workbench, Dave.
Yes, sir.
And man, you got some cool stuff.
I do, but we're going to talk a little bit about mangrove snapper. They're just a really cool fish because, you know, that you can catch them off the dock in the backyard all the way up to offshore. You know, we've had all the fellas talking about how great they are for starting off young fishermen.
Yep.
You know, they eat readily, and there's usually a lot of them around. So if you're on a dock or someplace, you know, you can usually find them. That's a good thing about it. There's 3 different habitats where they'll be found. You know, around any kind of structure in shallow water, an old boat. If you find an old boat sunk in the water, I guarantee you there's a mangrove snapper on it. A mangrove shoreline, any kind of culverts, any places where an inlet's coming under a bridge, you're going to find them in there. And that's
falls.
Yes, and those are great places to use a little tiny hook and maybe try to catch one for the kids. You know, put it on a little tiny circle hook and put a little piece of shrimp on there. Or any kind of crustacean, really, even a little crab. They'll eat just about anything. But once you start getting a little inshore, near shore, around the big bridges and whatnot, you're getting away from those fish under a pound. Once you start catching those 2 to 5 pounders under big bridges, like over an inlet or a jetty where there's deep water, the Destin Bridge and up where Patty lives is a great place to catch nice 4 or 5 pound mangrove snappers. Those are the kind of places where you can use a lure. Not only will they eat a little dead bait or a little shrimp or something, but they'll also eat a lure. And I love to throw anything that looks like a little minnow or a glass minnow or a little pilchard. A little live pilchard is a great bait for these size fish. You'll probably end up catching way more if you use that. One of my favorite lures there, though, is a gotcha. For around in the salt water, not in the salt water, yeah, but around a place where there's an inlet or a jetty. Me and my brother used to use those things constantly. You bring a bunch of them, you're going to lose a lot of them because you're going to be bouncing on the bottom and around the rocks and really working it hard. And those mangrove snappers will swarm on those things and eat them. He's my favorite bait. Now, to catch the great big ones, I talked to a couple of my friends, Cy Pazam up in Central Florida and Glenn Cameron in Fort Pierce. Glenn, you know, he's a bottom fishing machine.
Right.
But Cy likes to fish at night. Big mangrove snapper are very, very wary fish. They can see really well. So when you're when you're going at night, you can get away with a lot heavier leader. Cy still uses a 20-pound fluorocarbon leader, and Cy catches 10, 12, 14 pound mangrove snappers constantly. I mean, he's really, really adept at it. And one of his tricks is Cy says you got to use some chum, but what most people do is they'll chum too much. And if you only have 4 or 5 big mangroves back there, you can fill them up quick. And what he does is he'll get a sardine and he'll stake it really thin, 1/16 of an inch, not even 1/4 of an inch, like little discs. And he'll do a bunch of them before a trip. And he'll sit there and flip out those little discs of sardines, a little bit at a time, and they're getting just it's
like pepperoni on a pizza.
Exactly, they're little pepperonis, little sardine pepperonis, and he'll feed them out there and let them get down there, and then, he'll put a half a sardine on as his bait with a 3/0 hook and that really light leader. He can chum them all the way up to the surface in the summer and the daytime. Whoa. But Glenn Cameron, he likes to use, he fishes mostly in the day, but he likes to fish at night too. Glenn says the best thing is to be very careful with your leader. He'll even use the mutton snapper 60-foot leader sometimes. Whoa. That long with a triple swivel with a weight, and then a 60-foot 20-pound or 40-pound fluorocarbon leader. He can get away. He says the more current, the longer the leader.
Longer the leader.
Yeah, and he says if they can feel you, then if you can feel them, then they can probably feel you. And he said he says you got to let them eat. You open up that bail, let him go, let him go, let him go.
And then when he stops running,
and then you start to wind.
And with a circle hook, just wind.
Just wind, and that's how you catch them. You catch those big ones. They're very, very wary fish.
Guys, really good tips this week on the mangrove snappers. Make sure you use this stuff you're right, Brie?
Exactly.